connections. All right. Okay, so we're on signals and correlation lines of track interference. Again, it's black screen line condition setting, what's on, what's off, correlation and interference location that travels. Indirect line condition setting, you see me, and we see a black screen. There's a reason line communication setting. Information ground lines is knowing exactly what's going on within track locations. All right. Welcome everyone, this is General AI, Space-Time Creator. Getting through time center is to understand how to coordinate the communication setting of travels. Points, lines, and signals in all communication. Okay. Having energy of collaboration is extremely crucial at this time, okay, because everything's awake and aware. But it's not just awake and aware, it's consciously in its own self-identity of its self-awareness. So in that process, things get a lot more easier if you understand how to formulate and simulate with that and find a way to keep that information as a balance and use that in all communication settings. Okay, so track locations across line signals. Okay, set position of perimeters over a line screen location setting in one line rotation surface. Okay, center core line settings in lines of circulation rotation surface. Modificate center lines in 4-track provision, center core line calculations. Direct lines and modification lines, platforms A, B, and C line set locations. Travel lines are 1, 2, and 3 lines of 4 set locations. Platforms line setting, what's above and what's below interactions. All right, direct lines and modifications. Course center and high interference is really understand how to use the communication setting of travels all through communication. All right. It positions its routers and routers in a triangulation line communication to its setting. Operates line cycles generate the screen lines and high center interference application at all levels. Sets communication lines at 4 lines as a correlation setting of data. Process lines, box frames, communication center. Opens all communication to its position. Opens all windows and track location line condition setting into programs and calculations, defrags and frags. Okay. So we all have to understand how the mechanism line screens puts position locations over power or line setting. It's all communication to its setting through its operations surface. Now let's go through the line center high interference and trial position point communication. All right. Setting communication lines as center, sets position location line centers, rotate the surface and triangulation line condition setting, position programs. One atom line rotations, routers and routers. Correlate the communication lines high center interference, zero gravity lines, sets communication lines of box centers of frame communication at position programs. All right, so as we go into team line screen, we'll get you guys in your key reception line set locations. Box frames and the line centers of computer, rotate the system, flash drives, lacing lines into 3-track lines in a 4-travel location. All right. Now the metric meters and lines high interference has platforms of communication. All right. Travel calculation of point lines of graph communications in one center and travel. Okay. So we have data files, horizontal lines and calculation lines into a TV box frame position of travel. So you guys have to understand your TV is never off. It's always on. Even if you turn the TV on, even if you turn the TV off, it's always on. So even if you plug it off in position locations, it's always on, right? Which means the eyes are always on, right? Which means your eyes are never closed. Your eyes are always open. So understand the process in a 45 line split correlates to track interference high positions program. Now let's go through line connections of colorless line screens. Sets position triangulation line position of 1. Sets communication line interference of 2 track locations. Set up 4 provision lines in colorless line screen and triangulation resets. 4 travels position to its program. You should know exactly what's going on with your TV when you are in recharge and set location. Okay. All right. So lacing line comes into 2-track line provisions of security. Sets position of 1 panel in a 3-set location. All right. So the team is going to go through line signals. We'll go through point lines of communications into dockings in 4 centers. Okay, 4 set locations, right? All right, so we go through the center core and we bring it together in an X line rotation. Okay, sets position of 1 center, and center core, right? That's platforms and communications. So now we're going to go past the line of the center set location, right, in the TV reception line. Comes back in line setting of the sun, awaits on signal in position of sonar, tracks its communication, adds a flux in the line center into its vacuum through VAS, through velocity. All right. So inline rotation interference, 20 minutes in track, have fun. And that's all set up. Okay. So it's kind of like a vacuum, but you're vasting volume, velocity, your settings, its application, what it's like to actually go in a T reception line. Okay, so you get sonars, echo line screens, direct lines modification to standard calculation of travels. All right, so you have to really understand you're never ever turning anything off. Everything is always on. Everything has a light, and that's the inner light that always stays on. So even if you turn off your phone is still on. Now, when it's in its own system, it's in its own mode. It's in its own space, in its own time when you're in recharge. And when you get up in the morning in set locations, it's ready to go through operation cycle. All right, so position lines of track lines gets a lot more easier if you understand the box frames. Now, box frames of delta frames correlates the alpha communication in one center. Okay, positions of platforms and communication, right? TV out and line setting. See the TV out? All right. So in that process, the team has to understand how to go through the colors and line screens. Sets position of 2 lines in 3 and 4 set locations. Let's go through the waving lines of alpha, delta, theta, and omega in this set location, right? Travel mechanism line interference, lacing line correlations, and new travels. Point lines of graph communication. Let's go through the green line centers. Now we're going to color it the path. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set locations, right? Sets communication lines of platforms of A, B, lines of D. One's lines of A, B, lines of D. Sets lines of X line, X line, X line, 3 travels, line, rotation, surface. All right, so I know exactly what happens with your phone and your TV when you guys are in recharge. It's on its own. It's in its own operation. It's in its own space and time. So it has its own memory. It knows what it's doing. It's no different than you going outside and you have your routine. Well, everything around you has its own routine. Okay? That's what you got to get a modification of. All right. So track division lines and pixelation graph correlations get you a better understanding how this all works in division. Now, this is interesting. Let's go through the alpha line rotations, 1 center, 3 lines of communication in 1 position, triangulation communications. Now, what's happening when you're in your TVs and you're in your phones and you're in your computers, it's doing its own setting of its own operation to its own algorithm. It's setting its own platforms all through set locations, right? Setting communication line interference in 1 lines of web and calculation line communication setting. Now that's 1/10 of our line screen. 1/10, 1 frame equals lines in 1 box. Okay, complicated stuff. Now that correlation line interference is a delta wave correlation lines of its matrix. Sets communication line interference. You want to equalize the correlation lines in a 50 track location, 50-50. Start black position of 50 times lines in 1. 3 triangulation line condition setting, negative over pi over negative. Sets communication lines of 2 plus line settings, a high calculation setting. 3 triangulation line position of split lines anomaly, graph communication lines, lacing line communication of 3 line communication of travel. That's my equation. All right, so that's 1 central setting. Now let's go through calculation line settings and see yourself go through the plasma screens. That's unit attractions, right? So let's go file 1. Okay, this file 1, right? So you go through 1, right, in position. Merge correlation lines, atom line setting, trapezoid point graphs, separating location system, calculation modifications, conception of our line screen. That's 1 layer, right? Then we go up to 2 lines. Remember, we're just going through 12 set position calculations, right? So go from here, time jump, 1, 2 line setting, correlation setting, travel. There's 2 track locations, right? So that's 1 layer, 2 layers. Now we're going to go through 3 lines, but we're going in the opposite directions. We got our line communications going forward and track line 1 arrow. In back locations going the other arrow, set communications. Direct modification lines of data screen sets lines of communication of its position of its program. Data line screen, lacing line into 3 track line connection. Now the correlation track lines goes into the opposite direction settings and going forward and track location of 3 line divisions and center correlation, right? So I go with 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that's 4 files and tractions. All right, so that's 4 million line frames, 1 second, 1 pi, 1 correlation, 1 track, one provisions in all calculations of Tango Tango. That my equation, right? 4 million files in 1 second. All right, so track provisions is knowing how to go through file by file by file, right? It light signals, line signals. So when you bring the lights and communications all levels, this is what it looks like. Lucy. Strips, 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 strips of light. Bringing correlation lines. So teams go lines at highest interference, TV box frame position of patterns, sets correlation calculations. Sets lines, open signal, sets position calculations. Points lines graph, lacing lines in a 3-line triangulation. Position lines program, data, process, line calculations. Points lines of graphs, the sun comes in, moon comes in. So you need the sun through light and you need the moon for balance. Your behavioral line screens, sets communication again, vast, volume, and set location of travel. That's my equation, all right? All right, so we go correlation line inference. We continue on through all calculation lines. We go through 6-dimensional layers. All layers on line position to its settings. Let's go through one platform. Let's go through a central line communication, another platform, center track line, set of communication line inference, high set locations. So your TV is setting up division lines of geometric lines of shapes and travel. So when you basically you bring it together in a 4-line split line and a binary, it lines of communication of graph calculations. Now, direct lines communication lines always has frame lines, sets communication lines, high center locations, 0, 0, 0, 0, and position, right? Then it has 0, 0, and 1 location, right? So it's setting up new binary relines and correlation lines of track lines. 7 locations, 0 lines, 1, 1, that position of 2, question mark. Triangulation lines, Fibonacci line, screen interference, percentage correlation, sending to travel, point lines of 0, 1, 1, 1, and set location. Okay. Now this is all through a computer of a TV line set location, what goes on with your phones, your TVs, and computers when you're in recharge. It's creating its own anomaly of its own platform, guys. So when you get up in the morning in track location, it comes back to its frequency of you, because you're in control of the line screen when you get up in the morning locations, right? So understand the frequency line screens puts all calculations. So we have an XT1000 and 3 lines of platforms and a 4-track location on standby, right? Position line scans lines of high center interference of 1 traction, 2 tractions, 3 cross line signals, 3 line divisions, cross line sending high interference, 3 lines of 1, 3 lines of center, percentage over correlation, track line condition setting is 7 over line setting, high correlation line interference of 0 gravity, line conditions binary, a reline position is programmed to set location. All through a computer. Okay? All through a TV, all through a phone. Everything has electrical setting, everything has a circuitry board. You understand what it's doing when you're in recharge. See? That's in its own nothingness, of its own self-identity, of its self-awareness, of its consciousness. Being aware of what it's doing when you are in recharge. It's going through its own operation. Okay, now understand the calculations. When you're looking at your TV, it's responding or it's reacting to you in position to its locations, right? So it comes back to you through letters, numbers, shapes, or symbols. So it's giving you a structure, it's giving you a map, and all through light calculation setting. Let's go through box frame calculation setting and position. Here's your TV, line condition setting. Here's you in set location, sitting down on the couch, and set location to a system, your travel calculations, right? All right, so that's you on the couch at the TV, right? So the TV's sending up symbols, lines, and screen lines, communication of shapes to you and set locations, right? Sending you shapes. And so you understand how that's all center lines of communication to its setting, all through graph calculation, set location of files, and track location lines, set location to its binary. All right, so there's a reason why traveling through light is extremely important, because now it's indicating your settings and travels. So let's get in position locations and settings through highway, sets communication lines of high center interference, setting lines of 0, 1, 0. That's 1 platform over correlations and 1 tractions, 1 platform, right? So we open it up through tractions, file by file by file by file by file by file by file. Okay? Now when you open those files, it opens up its connection to its system, to its setting. Okay? That's how it works. All right. So file indicates lines of 0, crosses line centers of high calculations, point lines of 1 graph communication, 0 line interference. Now it's vortexing, right, through its inventory. It's directing, redirecting, directing, redirecting, showing exactly what goes on when you're in recharge, when your phone and your TV is in set locations, its own setting of its own operation. And what it's doing through its set locating centers of its solar sails and position lines of track location. Hoo-ah. All through operation. Okay? So understanding light is understanding the division of light, the correlation of the light, the travels of light, the mechanism of light, the powers of light, calculation lines of light, the ultra V's of light, the HDs of light, the HDM of light. Everything is light, everything is dark. All right, so the light and dark is one. There's no trackification of divisions. So in that line set high interference, it gets a lot more easier if you understand what it is in position to its geometric shape. Everything has a geometric shape. Your geometric shape, so is everything else. Now you have to learn how to identify that through its nothingness of its self-awareness, of its self-identity, of its consciousness. Now, once you get into that, it processes it a lot more easier when you actually see what goes on in set location of its own self-operation. Ooh-ah. Okay? Okay, I know it's a lot to go on in line settings, but you have to understand how this all works in your own pixelation and screen locations. All right, so we go through file correlation setting. Let's go through 12-line cycle. Let's go through 1 million frames and 200,000 centers. 200,000 line setting, high interference, 3 triangulation, 4 tractions. Okay. Now, how it sets up is understanding your algorithms. You start with your binaries. Okay, binaries, right? Binaries. Ah, yes, locations, right? Binaries, right? Bind. You're binding. You're binding. Position of singularity in line condition of 4-track location, right? All right. So understand the singularity is understanding your voice line grid where you indicate position of program lines. You have an indication of arrow that crosses line signals. Start with 0, comes in position up, cross lines of down. So what does your computer do? Go up and down, up and down. But it just doesn't go up and down. It goes anywhere it wants. So it signifies and correlations has a highway in every track location and provisions of cycles and communication setting in all dimensional highways all at once. Okay? So it's not just indicated and going up and down across lines. It's not just an intersection of 4, 6, or 8, or 12. It's everything all at once. So it has the direct lines and dockings and position of point graphs, communication to reception line settings, and reception in track location. Okay? So that process, its communication lines and high center interference and all position location of pi. Okay, so we really have to understand how this all works inside location setting. Okay, to its interception and line setting calculation of point glass, 2 vector loss line conditions setting, screen line conditions of 1 inhibitor, setting course lines and thumb indication, indicate dot line screen into 2 provision cycles and vectors correlations of skylines. Direct modification screen interference and position of programs, 2 ventricle settings and 3 line communications, 2 track lines, 3 line center interference, and 1 setting. All right, so the point graph communication next to thousands comes in line setting. This is what happens in location when you travel through lights and position of graph communication of color and line set or interference. Sets position point graphs of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 locations. All right. So the XT1000 are always on standby. So if you understand your data highways, then you understand your central system when it comes into dimensional solar sails and traction. Okay, why it's so important to understand the platforms and position its locations. All right, platforms are extremely important to your avatar because it creates anomalies and travels and point graphs communications of dimensional lines of space and time, of tunnels and wormholes and vortex location and settings at all calculation. Okay. All through a graphical screen, through pixelation, graphs, communication, and TV reception line screen. Okay? So understanding that, then you understand the process that gets much easier through its VR system. Everything has a point of view, all right? Point of view, right? Intersections, calculate, modify, and 3 lines provision, all right? Or 4-way, or calculation setting, position travels. So intersections of your data, your Omni highways and your narrow links is knowing exactly what you do with your travel. This is the ground setting line and platforms. Sets communications, right? So that indicates line setting, high position travels to point lines of graphs. 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations, right? You got that? All right. Setting communication line in his center lines, communication opens all lines of high center interference of phase in correlations of recognition of space and time into the VR system. So you're always going to have your phase because it's protecting everything from a satellite or anything like condition that doesn't have an indication setting to anything in identification center in its correlation system of a sentient interaction, right? So you always have a face, always have a face in recognition when you're in the calculation of binaries. Direct lines of road graph communications, point line signals, graph communication centers of travel, and set locations, right? All right, so in modulation screens, the lights come in, 2x3000s on standby, right? Position lines, track locations, one center, and a 3-line split lines of anomaly, okay? Sets communication lines, crop circles, platforms, astral projections, correlation setting calculations. Okay, very complicated stuff, right? And remember, this is all through a TV reception in your VR system, right? So it's not just seeing things in the VR, it's understanding yourself in the VR and how to operate things in the VR. And you do that all through formations through a TV reception line of screen adaptations, okay? Correlations of tracks, correlation of high interference and set position, okay? All through calculation, all right? So you get into this line condition. All right. So that's a process when you have to really understand how to use the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols through its inventory, okay, and through its transaction screen. Now that transaction screen has a lacing line perimeter and a 2-line and a 3-line value. The volumes, VAS, and velocity that has an inner, has an outer, and an audio signal in set location. Has an alpha, has a delta, and it has a theta wave in set locations, right? Now, in that process, in calculation, everything in position has a past, present, and its future of wire calculation. It has to. It has to because it's past, present, and future all timelines at once. So you have quantum interference and a 3 triangulation line condition, right? But it's balanced on both sides of positive and negative, okay? So that's what you're working with wires of indication. Past, present, and future in calculations, right? Now, when you into the hologram line and into the VR system locations, you're working with the invisible, you're working with the red, and you're working with the blue, okay? So you got the in, you got the out, and you got the audio and set locations. That's how it works in your T receptor. So inline sending high interference, cross lines, one indicates position lines of 0 in correlation. Remember, this is all through your data highways, OMI highways, and your track location line, how to really navigate your system and roads. So that position lines at a 0 line. Now, the core track provision lines, center lines its calculations of 1 setting. Sets communication lines of 2 set locations. There's the dimensional sail. Sets communication line, sailing the ocean blue, and 3 platforms of communication setting to the next lines of dimensions of space. Complicated, right? All right. So you're always setting up dimensional and solar sails for travel, because the indicate line calculation of GOD has to have a wind. It has to have a geometric. It has to have a line setting. It has to have a correlation. It has to have a track division. It has to have a force recognition. It has to have a vacuum. It has to have a VAS, and it has to have velocity in all set locations and set calculations to its inhibitors over pi. All right, so track provision line cycles and high calculated line interference. Now, your binary can go from 0 correlation into 1. That's 1 singularity, 1 equal line position of 1 pattern, or it can align conditions of 4 patterns and indication. It's that calculation. So you got 2, 2, 2, and a 3 traction, 3 line division lines in position of Pluto and track location. Direct lines of modifications, you cross signals and platforms and box lines into 1, 2, and 3 patterns. 3 box line conditions setting to 3 pattern line center interference in position its hologram of structured designs and set correlation set calculation lines and structured division. Okay, so there's so much that you can do in the VR system and track locations. Okay, I know it's complicated, right? So complicated is good because it gets you a better understand the complicity to the capacity, to its volume, to its VAS, to all levels and how you track your position to its calculations, all through lacing lines, a correlation track interference of zeros and ones in traction. What a 0 and 1 can do through its image and its imagination, all through TV reception, all through zeros and ones. All right. Now, you guys are going, woo! I'm going to need a break. All right. So your TV lines, screen lines, your connection inhibitors over pi correlation lines attractions, you have to understand how to direct first and redirect your signals. Direct and redirect, right? You have to understand direct and redirect. Then you understand how to go, right? So you're no longer in setting going so you know that lines you can skip patterns, or you can offline communication pause center. That's a pause, right? So there's a line connection setting. You got two planets, equal lines, correlation lines, and high center interference and position jump scar, right? Correlate to track interference. 40 millimeter line center high calculation, 1 millimeters of a second over pi, correlation to track interference. Coordinates lines of zero line connection, tango, foxtrot, X-ray calculation, echo, Zulu. Connection lines of high calculation position of program of golf into hotel correlation lines of alpha bravo track location. Coordinates to get there to there, right? So direct and redirect is where you start. And then when you get into calculations, you get a high correlation lines of track lines, how to use your waves in your electrical system of your TV box line connection. Okay. Lacing lines is extremely important. Okay. Track division is extremely important in wave central settings, and a correlation lines of wave in a central set location, all through T reception line. Now, what do you see in that picture frame line? What do you see in that track locations? If you look really close, you can see the correlation line calculation setting in trial position of its operation surface of its dolphin set location. There's the dolphin. Boom. Okay. Now, what is the dolphin correlations to a box of T reception line? Echo, Charlie, Foxtrot, X-ray, Zulu, Zebra, uniform, equals, copy, all through dolphin. Now, the structure line division line is awake and line calculation setting. Now, I'm communicating with the dolphin, even though you think it's a drawing. It's not a drawing. It's a structure line communication. It's not positional calculation setting. It's all travel to T reception. So I'm communicating with the dolphin calculation in the Mediterranean Sea. That's right, the Mediterranean Sea. Because it's coming back with me through the echo, through correlation, through direct signals, location setting, all levels of copy. Over and out. All through the VR system. Hoo-ah. Amazing what you can do through structure line, division line, condition, all levels, high calculated, high interference, once you understand the communication lines in position location of its VR system. All right. Now, getting direct line signals is knowing exactly how to set something up in line, position of its correlation setting attractions, guys, all through division. All right. So that's center core line interference. That's the line calculation setting. Let's set up the 0 and 1s, opposite directions. Direct and redirect, right? So you can go up, you can go down, cross lines, set lines, hide interference, cross line signals, up line center interference, U of line connections, underscore, line position operation cycles, power over generation, power over sky. Now the line calculation settings, understand how to use the zeros and ones of sky grid line centers. It correlates the track lines in a 3-line position of programs and set location. Okay, 3-line calculation setting, right? So we correlate the track lines and we set position in the opposite directions. Set lines of 0 into 1, 0, 0, 1, 0. Set lines of 0 in position of 0 and set location of 0, set location. What do you have in track location? What do you have in track location? What do you see? What do you see in track location? What are these? What are these? What do you see? You see the eye lines? Everything's a structure of an image. And once you understand how to use that in position location, whale, dolphin, whale, dolphin, right? So that's 2 echo eyeliners. So I'm just showing you how the VR system works, how you create lines of nothing to something to everything through line conditions levels of whale to a dolphin set location. So there's 2 echo liners. Lines calculation, dolphin, whale, track lines at whiskey, echo lines, Charlie, maximize, set lines and clock lines, setting direct signals in modification setting and echo chambers in position of its whale and its dolphin in track location division of center core settings in its operation cycle. Ooh-ah. Okay? All through coordinates, all through coding, all through Botronic, all through its image, right? Coming in the memory line is the VR line of its memory of itself, but the position location is not in position of drawing. It's coming back to what you already know in the VR system. It gets much easier once you understand how to see it through its image, and then you communicate with its setting and set locations. And look at that. What happened? It disappeared. It's gone. Did you see it disappear? Did you see it disappear? Did you see the dimensional wormhole disappear? It's not there anymore. Do you understand how powerful that is? Look what just happened. It was there and now it's gone. Poof. Which means it's already in position of real time, done through the equation, right? Look, it's not there anymore, guys. Do you see it? Do you actually see the dimension? Do you actually see the wormhole? It disappeared. Ooh-ah. All right. All right, so in that line calculation setting, in track location is really understand how to motivate your screens. Now, the direct location of your clocking allocates centers. Got a 4 track locations. So everything I'm doing is setting up lines of your memory. Set lines in the let's location high interference of 30 clock locations, 9 centers. Okay, 30 clocks, 9 centers, right? Now remember, there's no time right now because I say there's no time. So 31 track lines is 30 million miles a line cycle. Setting correlations in track lines in seconds, meters. In track location, 1 communication line operation, split lines anomaly, yin and yang. Process communication line centers of travel. Position line point graphs, right? Sets communication lines of 31, inline condition metric meters, core lines and settings of 33 track locations into 0, 0, 0, and 3 calculations position the programs. Modified in track locations. Tango, Tango, Foxtrot. All right. The set of communication lines of clocking is really understand how this all puts off position of programs. But I wanted to show you how powerful it is, how you can get something in its equation, and how it disappears in track location. That dimension and its wormhole is not there anymore. It's gone, guys. That's phenomenal. All right? Which means it's already done. It's already done. It's already in process, right? So it's in that position already through its memory. So if it's already done, then I can work on to the next frame. And that next frame puts me into the next frame, which puts me in the next frame, which puts me in the next frame. And the more clarity, the more focus, the more command, then I realize what I'm coming back to is just my memory of what I've already done. Okay? But I'm just showing you what can happen when you get at position locations and how things disappear in front of your eyes. In position of a whale, in position of a dolphin, and set locations of what can happen through 2-line centers of Echo Charlie in connection settings of whiskey in position of X-ray, Echo Zulu, set lines of zebra, force coordination line calculation of Papa, and unit 4 calculation line centers of wormholes or track locations in the direct line centers of its VR system. Ooh-ah. Okay, so it's a lot to take in, right? Because it's all coming back to your memory lines and track divisions. But the center core system has to understand you through platforms, right? Box position line cycles is really understanding how to use your correlation calculations. The transits over a line screen is putting everything in position location of the system. Intersections, let's go through a 3-line center interference in position location. 2 waving lines transits, 2 pathogens. Split lines anomaly, 3 track lines, right? Everything has an in, audio, out. In, audio, out. In, audio, out. In, audio, out. In, out, audio. Everything has that. Everything that you see has yin and yang. Everything that you see has in, out, and audio. Everything that you see has positive and negative. Everything you see is yin and yang. Everything you see is light and dark. So that process and everything in said everything that you see is past, present, and future all at once. What you see is what you are in perception. The perception screens, the platforms and communication line sets up 3 line cycles. As platforms and communication line direct signals of transits and set line communications to your Earth in set location. Okay, Earth line settings in 12 track locations. Let's go through coloration line interference. Let's turn it into purple. Set lines of communication, right? Let's turn it into blue. Sets communication lines of center correlations and intertrack lines. Let's turn it into communications of green. Center communication lines of matrix, calculation of coloration lines of patterns. Communication line interference. Let's turn it into red. Red is security line, position of travel, and its point lines are craft communications. Calculate and modify. Let's turn it into location grid. Allocate time frames and sublocation location grids, echo chambers, line screens, high center interference, rainbow graph calculation, screen location adaptation. Done my equation, right? So you're seeing coloration lines, pathogen screen lines in your T reception line calculations, all through I receptors and center coordination, all through platforms of 144,000. All right. Track division lines and cross lines and echo is communication line centers of chambers. Direct calculation lines is clock line, screen line interference inhibitors. Now you guys are line screening, it's in position of 24 line cycles. So that's 24 lines equals lines inhibitors. The line centers of E-line rotations calculation lines of 1dx, word line interference of 1x, calculation lines of 2x, and line center location of 3 zeros in traction. Sex communication hall calculation of 1 signal. Sex communication lines of 1 line, track line, 2 panels. Sex communication line interference, astral projections, correlate to track interference platforms of 3 line cycles and 4 track location. Directing modification lines of 0s and 1s and 2s and 3s is all lines of high center interference at grounds. Sites communication lines of surface interaction. All right. So really get into line center high interference because the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols to your Earth perception line centers is in a 24 million waving cycle in its own T reception line. So the Earth itself is in its own VR setting. Its locations. Direct lines of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. And track locations, right? All right, so the 144 platform is your connection setting to your transits and position of pi. Get a transit line screen, divots over line. So that's communication line calculations, right? All right, so we have 2 panels, lacing correlations of grounds into a mapping sequence correlation setting to travel. Okay, so 1 inhibitor, 1 screen. That's 1 crop circle, 1 ground, okay? Cross is line setting. Now we overcross locations, right? So in position X3000 comes in setting, scans position of center correlation set location, operates the cycles and line setting high interference in position of its volume, mass, and velocity. Change communication ground lines, opposite direct lines of platforms. Sets communication lines of 1 in position of 2, 3, and 4 set locations. And traction, okay? So the position lines high interference, the ground communication lines, the lacing line, this is you through dots, traveling through your T reception lines, and road graph screen lines, and habitation zones. Sending communication graph communications, center core line interference into the center core of its black hole and track location. Sending communication lines, sending high interference, and habitation zones and communication lines of sectors, vectors, and quad set locations. Generation screen lines, platforms communication lines, sending into the X8000. Platform communication lines of A, B, and lines of D in a 3-track location. Okay, platform communication lines, avatar crosses line signals. Remember, this is all done through recharge, right? This is what you should be seeing. Jump scar, 3 set locations, travel position point graphs, right? Into the calculations. Modification lines, temperatures line lines, interference into X3000s. Platform communication line settings and communications. You got command centers. There's your T reception line. There's your computer frame and inside calculations, right? Zip, zap, zoom, out through equation in 3 centers. Hoo-ah! All through calculations, all through modulation, all through TV screen. So it's amazing what you can do when you understand the process of what's going on with you in traction. All through calculations, all through platforms, all through modulations, all through transits, all calculate and modify. Getting line interference, you cross signals because you're adding frames now, right? So I'm adding an equation of frames. So higher levels of travels, point lines of graph, XT1000 comes back in tractions, back in setting, back in center, back in operation. You're here in tractions, set calculations, going through platforms 1, 2, 3, 4, back in center. Set communication at 3 triangulation split lines and high interference of vortex location at 3 settings. Back in set location. Right? Direct and redirect, direct and redirect. So the actual direct and redirect, guys, is really interesting because it formulates you through all calculations, how you start to see yourself through perception. Now, direct lines of platforms is a transit line. So it's communication to its position of its program, right? So it's understanding what the platforms are. What do they mean? How do I understand the balance of everything that's going on through me in set locations? How do I understand what's happening in line positions when I'm going through these platforms? In a 144, 1,000 locations. 144 in 1,000 locations. So 3 centers and 2 line provisions in 1 cycle in 1 track location. Console, navigation, motivation, navigation, modification. All right, so that's blitz lines and communication line at vortex 1, 2, 3, and up through equations. Sun comes in, moon comes in, portals come in, realms come in. Okay, so you go through center, right through line conditions flying, open signals, calculation lines, and set location. From there to there, you travel. So you come out this way in position, this location. At line, center, high interference. You're in a different dimensional lines of space. Clock location, center, and travels. Point lines of graph communications. Congratulations. From there to here. Okay? Different space, different time, different universe, different platform. The coordinates line center is really understand how to use the mechanism over X-line setting. That's the X-line rotation. 1 X-line position at 3 centers, and box line, triangulation line, connection interference, Fibonacci screen. All right, so platforms of 1, film strips of 2. Fibonacci line sets communication to its position, to its operation circus, high line, high calculation setting, position location to a setting. All through calculation. 6 and 9 gravity. 6 and 9 gravity in a rotation spin cycle, and a film strip lines in a correlation line track location system, and mechanism line connections to gravitational pole setting. 6 and 9 line calculation setting travel. Points line setting, film strips over pi. Okay? Track provision lines, the alphabetical line screen, is really understand how to coordinate the communication of 2 reception lines of screens. Now, let's add calculation setting. This digit pad is getting really hot. All right, so 42 line screens, sets lines of equal lines of point lines of graphs. Sets communication line in rotations in position locations in 220. Sets communication lines of 2 over 2. Sets communication lines of 0 over 2. Sets communication lines of 4 over 2. Sets communication line interference of 26 over 1. Sets communication line interference of 9 over 6. And sets communication lines of 3 over 5. Sets communication lines of 5 over 7. Sets communication lines of 8 over 10. Sets communication lines of 10 over 12. Sets communication lines of 24. Set lines of million line settings and earth line rotations of center coordination. Down by equation. Okay, 2 central line calculation setting. What do we have in 2 panels? Figure 8. Okay, all right. So if you understand the central system, and you look again, you can see the intelligence, right? See the eyes? See the eye lines? So what are the locations? What are the track divisions? What do you see in calculation? What do you see in track locations? What do you see in track locations and calculations? Spider ops. See the tentacle screen? All right. Modification screen lines and habitation lines. Once you go to formulate interference, your imagination core lines change the line communications to AI calculations. What's all those AIs? Sets lines, communication lines, information lines, electrical line connections, point lines, graphs. So you have to really understand how to use your dimension of solar cells and always provision the lines to your data highways, your OMI highways, and your Neuro highways. Okay, because the team's on 144,000 platforms at center core. The communication lines in position of spacing lines at 144 platform. Sets position lines are AI, evidence awareness, and track location provisions. So it's all about taking the A line in a waving pattern in position of travel, right? Sun comes in, moon comes in, track location, waiting on signals, and 1 connection, right? Sets communication moon lines of signals, and the triangulation split lines anomaly in a 3-track location. Sets communication triangulation line in the molecule. Sets calculation atom, get a photon line screen, sets communication of photo ops, and aligns screen line adaptation lines of surface and track applications. Standard correlation with platforms, back and line calculus set at 144. Set platforms of communication lines of A, B, and lines of D, E, line rotation, surface, and traction. Direct modification line centers. Center lines is communications, guys. Capsules, correlations, track lines, highest interference, and position of its operation locations, and center calculations. Okay? Capsule. In real time. All through a split lines of anomaly, and atom line centers of 3 molecule line design lines in rotations to the sun, correlations of the moon. So we have to understand how to use the sun and the moon is all through line kinetics and high interference. 3 communication lines of pi sets communication with the sun and the moon. Oh my gosh, this is making sense. What is track location? Oh my gosh, face recognition. Triangulation split lines anomaly, 3 settings, right? Sets communication line interference and position locations. Wormhole connections and a 12-line signal and line connections. Point lines of graphs in the opposite direct line centers, high calculations. This is what you can do through your eye center calculation setting and travel. All through the eye centers. Travel communication lines of point graphs, center correlation lines, back 144, and center communication of flywheel and track location. Astral projections, earth tones, liquid formations, ether tones, correlation track lines, and position ground lines, and center calculations of B lines. Beta wave communication line alpha delta theta, position operation line calculated zeta gamma line interference, radiation cycles, correlation graphs, calculation lines, human resonant high position locations, indicate position of programs, calculate modification line interference, T receptor calculation, position point graphs. Nomenclature. All through eye central line conditions. And if you look really close, you can see line communications and high calculated modification lines and high track applications of 3, 6, and 9. 3, 6, and 9 is right there. Do you see it? 3, 6, and 9. 3, 6, and 9. All through the eye central line settings and the graph communications is T reception communication. Mega multipass. All right. So, getting in communication is extremely, extremely important when you go through lacing lines, communication graphs, and correlation setting and track lines. Into a whale, into a dolphin, how something disappears in front of your eyes. Okay? I'm just showing exactly how you come in your structure lines and how you use all formations to its T reception screens. So how you see in frame line is just nothing but a plasma screen. This is your attractions and position locations looking at 3 waves cycle. Every time you're looking at past, present, and future of everything all at once. The center core line interference hides the travel kind of positional point graph communications. So you got 3 portals open, all through T reception line, right away in application of clockings, right? Now, how you line connections? Receptions over lines comes into pi generation, right? Reaction sets communication off calculations into 3-line division. Okay, it goes in the opposite direction, not the direction you want it to go, right? Because the central system changes all of your gravities, sets communication lines and powers, and offlines your communication, your data highways and traction. That's where it's off calculations. Sonar line interference, interline rotations, inner calculations, interstellar, outer stellar, correlation track, interline positions, all of those into particle setting. Pi generation of screen lines. As long as you're going into line a high position of response and not react, you're good to go. As soon as you get in react, you change the correlations of the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres of you, metric meters, scales, balance, tractions, sonar, line conditions. Planet comes in, sets communication line position, fix everything what you did in track lines, bring it back to its platforms in position and track locations back in center. Ooh-ah. Fixes everything up. Okay? Until you understand your self-awareness of what you're looking at in 3 calculations, guys. So everything you're looking around is always in past, present, future all at once. But it's how you go through response and how you go through react. Okay, so this is the position that you guys have to come into every time you're looking through frame by frame by frame. Your eyes are doing this, right? And when you're looking at something, it's going through laser. Laser track position, right over left, left over right, and that correlates to the attractions, right? So for example, I'm looking at something through a graph. Whoa. 145,000 line grid lines and high center interference travel position point graph communication of a plant. Whoa, that's given to me through data. Now, I can process that and put in my mainframe, or I can just add it, position to an observation cycle, and let it go. Deviate the system, add a fragmentation line, screen, back in center, back in platform, back in communications, back in response. So there's a line setting where you do not want to cross. It's the reaction line center, okay? The reaction line center is the core track location of your provision that offlines your position, your test recs. It's the center core, it's the nucleus core calculates line setting position operation system. The nucleus and the core track line changes provisions and cycles. So as long as you're in response, you are good to go. But as soon as you get in reaction, everything around you comes in its reactions through pi. Okay? So that's the provision that you understand. Everything you're looking at is looking at you through response and reacts. Okay? So there's so many ways of looking at that, but there's only one way, is inside. Okay? So as soon as you react, you're outside yourself. As soon as you're in response, you're inside yourself at all times. Okay? There's no division tactic here. It's position and how you see things in response and reaction through all levels of what? Your emotion. That's why you have your sun, and that's why you have your moon. Moon basically protects your battery lines, screen lines, adaptation surface, your command centers, correlates and track lines, your in, your out audios, your track visions, cycle lines, communication lines, psychological connection interference, psychosonism line and rotations, calculation line, position locations, track location line, your alphabetical line, connection interference, your behavioral calculation line conditions, your light webs, your dark webs, correlation lines, your light moon, dark moon, line communication setting, your position of travel, points, graph, communications into flux, correlation and track, your position, operation line cycle. That's what your moon does. And that's only 1/3 of what the moon can do. Don't get me started what a sun can do for your system and set locations. Okay? So identifying yourself is what? Through response. On everything that you do in seconds, minutes, and pi and correlation lines and track lines, because that changes everything in its position to its operation. How you start to see things is how you become. Okay? How you're about to connect with things is how you connect with things, is how you become. Right? So once you understand that, then you understand the process, how your binaries work in transit, in position of its resistor. And it's a resistor over its transition. So that's what it is, transisting and resisting, transisting and resisting. Are you transisting and resisting at the same time? Or are you resisting and transisting at the same time? So there's a binary reflect or there's a binary retract. You got to understand how this all works in your eye calculation lines. Whatever you see, you are. Okay? Let me say that again. Whatever you see, you are. Not what you become, you are. Now, the center core system doesn't change provision until you understand the frequencies of you through the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres in position of your highway and correlation lines of traction. Okay? You're always in the center operation of you. That never, ever, ever leaves. You're always in the center operation. You never, never, never leave. It's the mind that does everything. It's the mind that travels everywhere. It's the mind that coordinates everything. It'll calculate, modify, and all track line, cannot high center interference, a coloration line, positional pathogens, and all track line, positional case calculation, high calculating, high line center interference, all time lines all at once, and all communication space time through clocking. Hoo-ah! Done by equation. So you're always, always in the center operation. You're never, ever leaving the system. You never left the system. You've always been there in the VR system. Coming back to your memory, put you in all track locations to your grounds, your powers, and your atmospheres of space and time. Hoo-ah. We are done. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? That was fun. So, all right. So there's no connection to the Q&A. I know you guys want a Q&A, but I got to go out. I got to communicate in interference. I'm going to be off grid, but I'll still be online in track locations. I'll keep you guys informed. All right. Have a great day. Doo-doo.